Hello everyone. Have you ever wondered why English contains words from so many different languages? Why are some words Germanic, some French, and others Latin? The answer lies in a long and fascinating history that spans more than 1,500 years. Today, we will explore how English evolved from the language of ancient tribes into the global language used by billions of people around the world. Old English, 450-1100. Old English looked very different from modern English. If we saw an Old English text today, most of us would not understand it. The language had a complex grammatical system with many inflections, similar to modern German. Nouns changed their forms according to gender, case, and number. Word order was more flexible because grammatical endings showed the relationships between words. During this period, Christianity spread across England, bringing many Latin religious terms into the language. Later, Viking invasions introduced many Old Norse words, including common words such as sky, egg, take, and they. These contacts greatly expanded English vocabulary. Most of its vocabulary came from Germanic languages, and its grammar was much more complex. Nouns had gender, case endings, and different forms. Word order was more flexible because relationships between words were shown through word endings rather than sentence position. An example of Old English is, why? We Gardena in Gear Dagum. For modern English speakers, this sentence is almost impossible to understand. Middle English period, 1100 to 1500. The Middle English period lasted from approximately 1100 to 1500 and was one of the most important stages in the development of the English language. This period began after the Norman conquest of 1066, when William the Conqueror and the Norman nobles took control of England. Their arrival brought significant political, social, and linguistic changes that transformed English for centuries to come. After the conquest, French became the language of the royal court, government, law, education, and the upper classes. At the same time, Latin remained the language of the church and scholarly writing. Meanwhile, ordinary people continued to speak English in their daily lives. For several centuries, these three languages, French, Latin, and English, coexisted in England, each serving different social functions. As a result of this multilingual environment, English absorbed a large number of words from French and Latin. Thousands of new words entered the language, especially in areas such as government, law, religion, art, literature, fashion, and education. For example, words such as government, justice, court, religion, beauty, and language all came from French. This greatly expanded English vocabulary and made the language richer and more expressive. Another major change during the Middle English period was the simplification of grammar. Old English had a highly complex grammatical system with many noun endings, gender categories, and case markings. However, as speakers of different languages interacted, many of these complicated endings gradually disappeared. Nouns lost most of their grammatical cases, and adjectives became simpler. As a result, English relied more on word order to express meaning rather than on grammatical endings. For example, in Old English, the function of a word in a sentence could often be identified through its ending. In Middle English, these endings became less important, and the modern subject-verb-object word order began to develop. This change made English grammar easier and more flexible than before. Pronunciation also continued to evolve during this period. Different regions of England developed their own dialects, leading to significant variation in spelling and speech. Since there was no standardized form of English, the same word could be written in several different ways. Writers generally spelled words according to how they sounded in their local dialect. One of the most influential figures of the Middle English period was Geoffrey Chaucer. His famous work, The Canterbury Tales, written in the late 14th century, is considered one of the greatest achievements in English literature. Chaucer chose to write in English rather than French or Latin, helping to raise the status of English as a literary language. His writings provide valuable evidence of how English was spoken and written during that time. The language used in the Canterbury Tales already shows many features that resemble modern English. However, there were still considerable differences in spelling, pronunciation, and vocabulary. Modern readers can sometimes recognize Middle English words, but many passages remain difficult to understand without study or translation. By the end of the Middle English period, English had regained its position as the primary language of England. It was increasingly used in government, education, literature, and public life. The language had changed dramatically from its Old English origins, becoming simpler in grammar and much richer in vocabulary. The Middle English period therefore served as a bridge between Old English and modern English. Through the influence of French and Latin, the simplification of grammar, and the growth of English literature, this period laid the foundation for the language that millions of people speak around the world today.
Early Modern English period, 1500 to 1700. The Early Modern English period, which lasted from approximately 1500 to 1700, marked a major turning point in the history of the English language. During this time, English began to take a form that is much more recognizable to modern speakers. This transformation was influenced by important developments in technology, education, literature, science, and exploration. One of the most significant events was the introduction of the printing press to England by William Caxton in 1476. Before printing became common, books were copied by hand, and spelling often varied from one region to another. The printing press made books more accessible and helped spread a more consistent form of written English. As a result, spelling and vocabulary gradually became more standardized, although many spellings remained different from modern usage. Another important change was the continuation of the Great Vowel Shift, a major change in pronunciation that began during the late Middle English period. Long vowel sounds changed significantly, making spoken English sound very different from earlier forms of the language. However, because spelling had already begun to become standardized through printing, many words kept their old spellings even though their pronunciation changed. This explains why English spelling today can seem irregular and difficult to learn. The Renaissance also had a strong influence on English. This cultural movement encouraged the study of classical learning from ancient Greece and Rome. As a result, thousands of words from Latin and Greek entered the English language, especially in fields such as science, medicine, philosophy, mathematics, and literature. Words such as education, encyclopedia, temperature, and democracy became part of English vocabulary during this period. Literature flourished during the early modern English period, and no writer had a greater impact than William Shakespeare. Through his plays and poems, Shakespeare introduced hundreds of new words and expressions, many of which are still used today. Expressions such as break the ice, heart of gold, and wild goose chase originated from his works. Shakespeare's writings also demonstrate how flexible and creative English had become. Grammar also continued to simplify. Many older grammatical forms disappeared, and sentence structures became closer to those used today. The use of auxiliary verbs such as do, have, and will became more common. Pronouns also changed. For example, the old forms thou, thee, and thy gradually disappeared and were replaced by the more universal pronoun you. By the end of the 17th century, English had become a strong national language used in government, education, literature, religion, and trade. It was now much closer to the language we speak today than to Old or Middle English.
Modern English period, 1700 to present. The Modern English period began around 1700 and continues today. During this time, English spread throughout the world as the British Empire expanded across different continents. As English came into contact with other cultures and languages, it borrowed many new words and developed different varieties, such as American, Australian, and Indian English. The Industrial Revolution and scientific advancements introduced thousands of new words related to technology, transportation, medicine, and industry. Later, the growth of newspapers, radio, television, and film helped spread English even further. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the rise of the internet and globalization made English the dominant language of international communication. New words continue to appear through technology, social media, and popular culture. As a result, modern English remains a flexible and constantly evolving language.
The history of English is a story of migration, conquest, cultural exchange, and innovation. From its Proto-Indo-European roots to its role as a global language today, English has changed greatly in its grammar, vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. Each period, Old English, Middle English, Early Modern English, and Modern English, contributed to shaping the language we use today. The development of English shows that language is always changing and adapting to the needs of its speakers. Today, English connects people around the world, and its journey continues as new generations create and influence the language of the future.